Hello, and you're welcome to the Change Africa podcast. My name is Isaac Ojedinwabua, and this is where we sit with inspiring Africans who are leading the change to transform the narrative about the continent. And today we have with me my very good friend and young writer, creative, Afrofuturist, teacher, Jacob Osae. And we're going to speak to Jacob about a couple of things. But around creativity, his writing, his experience as a teacher in a community where teaching is not valued as much, his thoughts around creativity, Afrofuturism, and how we can mirror technology and writing and creativity together. So it's going to be an exciting conversation around building the next generation of African talent in writing and technology and creativity. So I have with me Jacob Osae. Jacob, welcome to the Change Africa podcast.
Thank you very much, Isaac. I'm so excited to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
You know, something I've never asked you, Jacob, is that you have a speech, I don't know what I call a disorder, difficulty in speech. Has it ever become a problem for you? First of all, when did you notice that you had this problem? Was it always something that you got while you were growing up? And was it ever an impediment for you growing up?
Okay, so I think the first time I really realized that I had this difficulty in talking was in JHS. I was called by a female teacher to give a question, which I knew the answer. And here I was fumbling and like, oh God. So that's actually when I realized that this thing is actually something that I'll have to deal with growing up. But it has never been like a hurdle to anything I have always set my mind to do. I feel for time I've learned how to control it, and as time goes on, I'm getting better with it. But mostly sometimes it pops up, but mostly I'm now good at controlling it, and yeah, that's it.
Excellent. But I want you to tell us, Jacob, about yourself. Where did you grow up? And more importantly, tell us the story of how you got interested in writing.
So I grew up, I was born in Accra, North Kaneshi, to an electrician dad and a seamstress mom. So I went to school, primary, junior high school, senior high school, Accra Academy, then moved on to the University of Ghana. In Accra Academy, I studied general science. And that's actually where the whole creative writing thing started for me, because I had amazing people who came to inspire us through poetry, through creative writing. The Readers and Writers Club, the school prefect was in my class, was an amazing guy who was good at science, was a good poet. So looking at such a person, it was just an inspiration for us. And I also remember one time, Alakasa came to our school to do an incredible poetry administration. And instead of being in class, I was at the assembly hall listening to these people reciting poems amazingly, and that's where it all started. So that's where I started writing poetry, because the leader, who is called Sir Black, said, when you go home, also write your own. And I went home and I wrote my first piece of poetry titled Talking to the Moon. So from there, the passion and the zeal just broke out in me, and every little opportunity that I had, I just wanted to scribble something down. That was in the final year, 2012, preparing for Osae. So after Osae, I spent a whole year at home, just perfecting my creative skills, writing poetry, short stories, writing songs. I even wanted to be a musician, because I had a friend who had a studio. So intermittently, I went to the studio, scribbled some scripts, he created some soundtracks, and we were like, let's put this together. But everything changed when I got admission to the university, and I had to leave to the University of Ghana to continue my school. So that's how writing started for me. So in the University of Ghana too, I continued writing, though the course I was offered to read was physics, mathematics, and computer science. It didn't deter me from writing at all. I still had a passion. I still dedicated time to write, and I wrote mostly in the university. I was more focus on screenwriting, writing for TV, because I was so passionate about TV. I had so many interesting TV series that I watched, and I really wanted to create something similar. So I learned the art of writing for TV, screenwriting, and a bit of playwriting. So basically, that's something that I was so interested about. Then in level 3, I met a guy who said, "Okay, you have to write a book." Initially, I never thought of writing a book because for me, it was not really a thing for me. I wanted to write script for TV. So that's the first time the thought of writing a book came in, and I started writing, And the final year, I also met Writers Project of Ghana, because the director was actually a lecturer in my department, Dr. Martin Igwe, and we went through an incredible creative writing session called Writers Cafe Saturdays, and it was so helpful. So, pragmatic and, evolving, teaching us the basic of creative writing, and that's all those things that have shaped us to become the kind of person we are. And in 2020, I launched my maiden science fiction novel titled The Raven, and I think that's the best I've written so far. But there's more to come as we stay tuned.
There's a lot of words and stories in there, but let's, unbundle your journey. Before you met the El Casa group, and if you are listening, El Casa is one of the pioneering spoken word groups in Ghana that have really kind of expounded the art of spoken word and popularized it through, competitions on high schools, outreaches, and trying to bring a certain kind of swagger that was previously missing in the spoken word genre in Ghana. And that is the group that inspired Jacob during his high school to get to start writing. But the question I was trying to ask is, before El Casa came, what did you aspire to be, and how did the confluence of the meeting of El Casa, kind of change your trajectory or influence you to start writing really? What was it particularly?
Okay, so before El Casa, I wanted to be an engineer, just like my dad. My dad is an electrical engineer, so basically I had basic knowledge going to work with him. Mostly when I was in primary school, we did a lot of work together. So I wanted to be an engineer. But in Accra Academy, there was something like we learn from each other, even though we're colleagues. The thing is that when someone does something and it's amazing and it's mind blowing, someone also wants to do the same thing. So I think that's something that formed the basis for also learning to write poetry, because a lot of my friends in class were writing poetry, and they'll come and present it or perform it at assembly, and it was so amazing and so beautiful. It was like, hey, so what am I doing with my life? So meeting at La Casa was like the threshold or the green light that we needed. We needed a spark, and I think La Casa came in to flicker or add flicker to the flame that has culminated us to this point. So basically, that's how it all happened.
Okay. And you said that your first poetry was Talking to the Moon. What was Talking to the Moon about?
Talking to the Moon was basically more mostly growing up. I've been a quiet guy who doesn't really like talking, always behind the scenes, always in the corners thinking about my life. So Talking to the Moon is more like a metaphor where you're talking to yourself, or you're talking to a divine being, asking the strangest and the most strongest questions about life. What is this life about? Why am I here on earth? So the moon is a symbol of a deity, what we believe in, and basically the quietude, because the moon only appears in the evening, and the evening quietude is a picture of how solemn such moments are. I believe everybody has this point in their life where they ask the difficult questions. What is this life all about? What kind of life am I living? And hopefully they'll want answers. So that is the idea for Talking to the Moon. A moment or a season where you reminisce what life is all about and how far you wish life can be for you.
That's an interesting one. You've spoken about, multi-genres that you are trying to approach. One of them is screenwriting. But before I go into that bit, you were a young writer, and in high school you found that, love for poetry. As you reflect back to those days, what are some of the difficulties that you faced, and how do you now, having realized that you've improved, would you do, differently if you, for example, were meeting that old self, or you had an opportunity to solve the problems that you face?
Okay, so in high school, I discovered that I didn't really have so many people to critique and review my work. So I wrote a lot, but I believe so far as I've been able to write it, I don't really have to show it to anyone. I just kept most of my works in my book, because I just kept on writing any idea that popped in my head. Anytime I had an inspiration, I would just put it on paper and put it in my notebook, actually. And that was for me. But growing up, I got to see that your first work, or what we call the first draft, is not actually the best. You always have to do reviews. You always have to proofread, because it's through that process that you get the refined work. And there was not so many organizations or models or mentors who could have, or who aided me in the process. So I was alone writing and keep building my books until I got to the university, where I met a bigger organization that said there's more work to be done. And so going back, I'll say if only there will be creative writing groups in the senior high schools to help nurture and harness and shape in people who are gifted, I'm sure it will go a long way to help them.
Okay, then let's move into the space where you were doing screenwriting. What were you thinking? What was your motivation at that time? And what are some of the things that you were writing around?
Screenwriting came quite interesting because I had a friend who were so enthused about TV series, popular Arrow, The Flash, Suits. We watch all these series and like, man, this is good. We don't have something similar like this on our TV screens in Ghana. So let's create a TV series and also maybe pitch it to a producer and maybe you can produce it. We want something like Grimm here in Ghana. For those who have watched Grimm, you know how amazing Grimm is. We want something like The 100, something classic, So that was how it started. So I met this friend who was also passionate about the same thing. So we came together, we formed a group, we discussed the stories, and I write the script. And we had a lot of issues because we didn't know how we were going to move on to bring these stories onto the screen. But yeah,
if you tell me you didn't have any professional training in script writing, so how did you figure out how to write a script?
Okay, so that's very interesting. So what I did in my screenwriting process is I downloaded a lot of TV scripts, mostly American from Hollywood. So I had script for Arrow, script for Flash, I had the Vampire Diaries script, I had script for Suits, I had script for The 100, any TV series ever. Because the thing is that they mostly keep the pilot script available, so you can download them. So I had a lot of script and I read them and watched them. So after I watch, I read, just to make sure there's a correlation between the conversations, the actions that I see. And also I had to do a bit of analysis about the technicalities in screenwriting, because you need to know when a character is talking, whether it's a voice over, off screen, cut, introduction. There are certain technicalities that came with screenwriting, and I had to learn all those things quite fast and early. I remember one time I stayed in school during a long vacation just to learn screenwriting. While my friends were in the house, I was in school at the Baum Library learning screenwriting.
So what was your motivation at that point? Because clearly there was not a visible, or what I would say, a clear pathway for you towards turning those scripts that you were writing into movies. So what kept you moving? What kept you learning it?
Okay, so first I'll say the main thing that kept me moving was the passion because for a person that I am, anything I have a passion for, I would like to do it to perfection. I like to do it to completion. So far as I said I want to learn screenwriting, I made sure that I did it perfectly to completion. And also I had some few other people who were seniors in the theater art who said they would like to produce some of the script. I actually had a guy who wanted to do a music series on campus from the theater department. So I had to write a script. I remember I wrote the pilot script for him, and all night I didn't sleep, finished the script. I sent it to the guy. It couldn't be produced. So I had other people who actually were interested at some point in time, and I stayed all night, wrote script for them, but still couldn't produce them.
So, do you have any ambition or vision to, write scripts, write for the screen, write for theater, or, have an ambition to produce any of these things, or even write more and produce them in the future? Or you've kind of moved away from that genre?
I'm so still optimistic. I'm looking for opportunities still to produce, because there's a lot I've written still in my Google Drive that I feel it would be great when they are produced on the screens. Amazing stories that I've written, and in case I don't get anyone to make this happen, I'm looking to the future where I'm producing myself. Yeah, because they are great stories that will inspire the next generation of creators.
Can you tell us some of the stories that you wrote?
Okay, so there's this. I wrote this science fiction futurism titled Exeter. So basically, it's about 3 young people who travel into the future and they see the devastation or the destruction of Africa, and they are sent back in time to obtain something called the Exeter that is believed to be something that can actually save Africa. So that was the short film that I wrote, about 12 pages. Then I also wrote a complete movie called Eccentric Me, about a young guy who is destined to be the salvation of the African continent, and he dies and he comes back from the dead after receiving divine revelations from a group of people called the Black Girl. The Black Girl is believed to be an ancient African secret society that have a relic that can transform Africa, but there's another organization called the Aurora who are bent on destroying or averting what the Black Girl seeks to achieve. Then I also wrote Dilemma. Dilemma was a TV serial that was mainly inspired by Suits and a bit of Scorpion. There was a TV series called Scorpion that was more into computer science. So in Dilemma, they have a young guy who's a hacker who amazingly getting his world intertwined with a young girl who's a creative writer, and it explores the world of dark cyber life, hacking, and creative writing, literature. And these are some of the pieces that I've written, and I look forward to producing them, especially Dilemma. Dilemma should come on a Ghanaian TV screens. Dilemma, I tell you, you're going to love it.
Jacob. So, Jacob, it is very clear that you have a penchant for writing, obviously for Africa, right? How prominent is the African story in your literature? And why is it so? Why are you so passionate about writing for Africa, for African audience, about African history, retelling the African story from a technological perspective, some kind of like a Wakanda-like literary perspective?
Yeah, I believe it's very needful for us as creatives, as African creatives, to also, explore the dimensions of the creative prowess that is endowed in this beautiful continent called Africa. Looking at the amazing stories that have been told in the past by Africa. Nigeria is amazing. They have done so much when it comes to literature, drama, screenwriting, and TV series. And I feel it should not be only a particular country doing it. All of us should be on board and tell stories that define who we are, that explore our identity, that explore our strengths, explore our creativity and ingenuity. Because it's quite difficult for a white person to write